Yo, mi gente. Top Rank has officially turned Zayas versus Perez into an extremely underrated Latino fight card. I could show you, but I could tell you. Without further ado, let's get right to it. Make sure to hit that like button on your way in. Here we got, taking the main event, Puerto Rican fighter Xander Zayas, 21-0 with 13 KOs, facing up against Mexican fighter Jorge Garcia Perez, who is 33-4 with 26 KOs, for the vacant WBO title that Sebastian Fundora done vacated. That being said, this is a Puerto Rico versus Mexico rivalry taking place for the main event, and it is for a world title, which means this could be the opportunity for Mexico to catch up to Puerto Rico when it comes to the World Championship matchups, when it comes to this Puerto Rico versus Mexico rivalry. You know, Puerto Rico is up by about double digits when it comes to the World Championship title fights against Mexico. However, Mexico is up when it comes to world champions in general. So this could be a great way for Puerto Rico to add more to the World Championship title fights against Mexico and becoming another world champion to catch up to, the very large amount of world champions that's coming out of Mexico. Yeah, I mean, then we got Jorge Garcia Perez, who could possibly catch up and turn those double digits into single digits going up against Xander Zayas if he shall come out victorious. Now, it's only a matter of time till we see how things turn out. That being said, this is the main event and will be fireworks. I guarantee it, so make sure to tune in. We got next, taking the co-main event, from my understanding, is Dominican fighter Rohan Polanco, 16-0 with 10 KOs, going up against American fighter Randall, 15-2 with 3 KOs. This is going to be interesting as well, at least for Rohan Polanco, who's continuing to climb the rankings at that 147 division. In addition to that, Dominican Republic is starting to become more familiar in the boxing world. Not so yet right now to the highest level, but they have the opportunity in this era to really stamp Dominican Republic boxing. And Rohan Polanco is definitely one of those candidates that could contribute into making that happen. We have several others, but Polanco is definitely one of the main names that you think about when you think about Dominican Republic boxing. That being said, if he does come out victorious, this does open up a lot more opportunities for bigger matchups that we could see in the near future coming out of Dominican Republic. That being said, shout out to Dominican Republic. And now we move on to the next matchup. And here is Dominican fighter Yan Santana, 14-0 with 12 KOs, facing up against Mexican fighter Aaron Alameda, 30-2, 17 KOs. Now, this is going to be very interesting too. We all know there's a Puerto Rico versus Mexico showdown. There's not so much of a showdown or rivalry that comes with Dominican Republic at all. However, now that they're becoming more familiar in the sport of boxing, they could definitely brew up some type of rivalry. Sometimes we think about the PR versus DR rivalry because there's a big rivalry outside of boxing. But in boxing, there's not much there just because Dominican Republic hasn't quite stamped the legacy in the overall country when it comes to boxing. That being said, though, we got Yan Santana, who is another candidate when it comes to the rise of Dominican boxing, facing off against what seems to be a very, competitive challenger in Aaron. Aaron is 30-2. That means he's very well experienced with 17 KOs, and he got some knockouts under his belt as well. Only 2 losses. So this is definitely a step up in competition for Yan Santana. And this will show how good he is facing off against a fighter that has a much more experience inside of that ring than he does. In addition to that, it also opens up more opportunities for Dominican Republic if he beats this fighter by the name of Aaron, and could open up more interesting fights moving on in that division. So that being said, let's move on to the next. And we got Mexican fighter Emilaino Vargas, 14-0 with 12 KOs, facing off against Alexander Espinosa, 20-3 with 9 KOs. He is Ecuadorian, by the way, as well. Alexander Espinosa is Ecuadorian. So there's another Latino fight taking place right here, and this is going to be interesting because Alexander Espinosa seems like he still has a good record. You know, he got 3 losses. He has been KO'd. And we know Emiliano Vargas to be a KO artist so far, you know, taking out some of these younger prospects or just not even younger, but more, you know, lower ranked prospects. But now he's facing off against somebody that, you know, seems to have more experience than he does inside of that ring. And we get to see how that turns out. I'm a big fan of Emiliano Vargas. He is one of the brothers, one of the Vargas brothers. You know, his father, we all know who he is, being one of the most legendary Mexican fighters from America, at least. And this should be a great matchup. He's a great offspring of his father, which is very interesting to see, especially because he's the youngest, and everybody consider him to be the best Vargas brother. That being said, all the Vargas brothers are still undefeated, by the way, but this one seems to have something special according to everybody else's observations of the Vargas brothers. I would like to see how this turns out. I'm a big fan of Emiliano Vargas. He has, I believe, the full package of a world champion. It's just a matter of how he performs moving forward. But, you know, he's easy to market. He seems like pause, but he has this charming aura about him. He's very good inside of that ring. He knocks motherfuckers out. That's one thing. But he also has great boxing abilities. You know what I'm saying? He seems humble at the same time. And he seems mature and ahead of his time as well. And I think that comes with, you know, having older brothers and a father that's there and he could pick all of their brains to overall become a great evolution to the Vargas name. That being said, this is another banger that's going to take place. As far as you being a fan of Emiliano Vargas, you will enjoy the show when it comes to this matchup. That being said, let's move on to the next one. And we have here Steven Navaro, Mexican fighter, 6-0, 5 KOs, going up against American fighter Christopher Rios, who is 11-2 with 7 KOs. I believe Christopher Rios might be a Mexican as well from America. They might both be from America, actually. But, you know, it seems like Top Rank in this build-up is only promoting the nationalities of their fighters, right? So that's why I'm breaking down their opponents as well, to be fair. Because at the end of the day, like, if even when you look at this real quick, let me show you this before we move on. Even when you look right here, you see that, you know, Garcia is a Mexican fighter, and I believe he's straight from Mexico. Like, he's not a Mexican American, straight from Mexico, if I'm from my understanding, right? But they don't have the Mexican flag over his face like they have the Puerto Rican flag over Zayas. That being said, it seems like they're mainly promoting the nationalities of their fighters that signed to Top Rank. So I'm not too sure where Christopher Rios comes from, but as I, you know, grabbed this information from BoxRec and whatnot and got their records, it did say that he was American, but I do believe his background is also Mexicano. That being said, these are still young fighters, obviously. You know, I'm not too familiar with who Steven Navarro is, but he seems to be a knockout artist so far, collecting 5 KOs out of his 6 victories, which is pretty impressive to start off your career. Then we got Christopher Rios, who is 11-2 with 7 KOs. He's a little bit mid-range of his career as far as this day and age, because nowadays it seems like fighters are, how would I say, it seems like fighters are ending their careers more earlier than they used to back in the days. Motherfuckers used to fight 60, 80 fights, you know what I'm saying? Nowadays, it got, you know, minimized to about 30 fights. It seems to be average. So I would say he's more or less closer to the mid-range of his career, Christopher Rios. And he has 2 losses already. So this is still a step up for Steven Navarro. You know what I'm saying? I think there's a great matchup, and considering the records, is a great fight for his 7th fight as far as for Steven Navarro goes. That being said, make sure to pay attention to this Mexican fighter. He seems like he's coming up, and he's from Top Rank. And, you know, Top Rank does great with their prospects. That being said, let's move on to the final one, who I believe will be opening up the card. And he goes by the name of Juanmita Lopez. Puerto Rican fighter, 2-0, 1 KO, facing up against another Puerto Rican fighter in George Gonzalez Sanchez, right? He's 5-2 and 4 KOs. That being said, this will be just another fight for Juanmita Lopez to because it's pretty obvious Juanmita Lopez is the favorite. He is facing up against a fighter who collected 4 knockouts out of his 5 victories, so he does got to be careful. But this fighter also has 2 losses. Juanmita Lopez, being signed to Top Rank, like I mentioned, is looking to be the favorite, but he did have his second fight against this other fighter from Puerto Rico, which seemed to be very challenging. And it almost feels like the most challenging fighters for Puerto Ricans are Puerto Ricans. The fighter he was going up against don't seem to be as promising as someone like Juanmita Lopez, but he was still able to knock down Juanmita Lopez within the first 5 seconds of the fight. However, Juanmita Lopez overall looks more impressive than the last fighter that he faced, and he ended up winning that fight by decision. Juanmita Lopez does have the tools, but in the last fight, it low-key proved that if you have the right amount of aggression, you can bring some trouble to Juanma. That being said, though, I'm a big fan of Juanma. Why? Because even when he did get knocked down, he got back up and did his best to get it back in blood, showcasing impressive boxing abilities. And that's why I would follow somebody like Juanma. There's gonna be a banger as well. I already know it is. Because I don't believe George Gonzalez is just gonna lay down for Juanma. I believe a lot of these fighters actually are not fearful of Juanma so much, and that's why they come out strong. However, it just seems to be so far, still very early, but it just seems to be that Juanma is just a few levels ahead when it comes to boxing abilities and overall gets the job done. He only has 2 fights in, so it's still early. But from what we observed so far, Juanma seems to be pretty promising, man. And I think he's going to deliver us a lot of great fights. That being said, this is one of the cards that I believe will be one of the fights that will be opening up the card. Juanma has a lot of anticipation right now. He's looking promising. So we're gonna be covering this match, this fight card for sure, from bottom to top. So make sure you got tune in to VicSznTV. And let me know out of all the fights that I just showcased to you guys on this card, pick out the winners and we'll go over it again one last time. Let me know who you got for, let's start with obviously the main event. Let me know who you got for Zayas versus Perez. Let me know who you got Polanco versus Randall. Let me know who you got with Santana versus Arum. Let me know who you got with Emilaino Vargas versus Alexander Espinosa. Let me know who you got with Steven Navaro versus Christopher Rios. And finally, Juanma Lopez versus George L. Gonzalez. Give me your predictions in the bottom. It don't have to be crazy yet. You don't got to get specific, But let me know in the comments, just matching up the name. Just put the names who you believe are going to win these matchups. That being said, thank you for tuning in once again. This is VicSznTV, and I'm out. Toma!